Have you ever noticed how the harder you try to change your life, the more stuck you become? There's something happening beneath the surface that most of us miss because we're focused on the external circumstances we want to shift. What if I told you that the most profound transformation doesn't require months of struggle, years of therapy, or dramatic life overhauls? What if real reinvention could happen in the next 60 minutes? In the next hour, I'm going to share something that might sound impossible at first, but by the end, you'll understand why instant transformation isn't just possible, it's your natural state. The people who seem to effortlessly reinvent themselves know something the rest of us are missing. It's not what you think, and it's definitely not what they teach in self-help books. Stay with me because this changes everything. Most people believe that change takes time because they're trying to fix the wrong thing. They're attempting to modify behaviors, circumstances, and external conditions when the real transformation happens at a much deeper level. It's like trying to change your reflection by manipulating the mirror instead of simply changing your position. The illusion of time. Right now, you might be thinking, how can anyone reinvent themselves in just 1 hour? That's impossible. But let me ask you something. How long did it take you to fall in love? How long did it take you to have a life-changing realization? How long did it take you to shift from confusion to clarity on something important? Sarah was a marketing executive who felt completely disconnected from her life. She had spent years trying different approaches: therapy, meditation retreats, career coaching, relationship counseling. Nothing seemed to create lasting change. She would make progress for a few weeks, then find herself back in the same patterns of dissatisfaction and emptiness. One afternoon, during what seemed like an ordinary conversation, something shifted. It wasn't a dramatic moment or a lightning bolt revelation. It was more like waking up from a dream she didn't even realize she was having. In less than an hour, she saw her entire life from a completely different perspective. The problems that had consumed her for years suddenly seemed irrelevant. The person she thought she needed to become was already there, waiting beneath layers of conditioning and false beliefs. This wasn't positive thinking or temporary motivation. This was a fundamental shift in how she experienced herself and her reality. 6 months later, she had naturally transitioned into work that aligned with her values, improved her relationships without effort, and felt more authentically herself than she had in decades. Sarah's transformation illustrates something profound. Change doesn't happen in time. It happens outside of time, in a moment of clarity that reorganizes everything that follows. Think about the moments in your life when you've experienced genuine transformation. Maybe it was recognizing that you deserved better treatment in a relationship. Perhaps it was realizing that you had been pursuing someone else's dreams instead of your own, or it could have been the moment you understood that your worth wasn't dependent on external achievements. These shifts didn't happen gradually over months. They happened in an instant of recognition, followed by natural changes in behavior and circumstances that reflected your new understanding. We've been conditioned to believe that meaningful change requires struggle, time, and tremendous effort. But this belief itself is what keeps us trapped in lengthy processes that often lead nowhere. When you understand how transformation actually works, you realize that most of the time we spend working on ourselves is actually resistance to the change that could happen immediately. The truth is, you're always just one realization away from a completely different life. Not because you need to become someone else, but because you need to stop being someone you're not. The architecture of identity. Most people think their identity is fixed, permanent, unchangeable. They believe they are their history, their patterns, their limitations, their roles, their achievements, their failures. But what if everything you think you know about who you are is just a collection of outdated stories? Your identity isn't a thing, it's a process. It's not what you are, it's what you're doing moment by moment. Every thought you think, every story you tell yourself, every role you play is an active choice, even when it feels automatic. Right now, you're maintaining your current sense of self through thousands of small choices. You're choosing to think certain thoughts, believe certain stories, respond in certain ways. You're actively creating the experience of being you moment by moment. But you're doing it so habitually that it feels like who you are rather than what you're doing. Imagine you're an actor who has been playing the same character for so long that you've forgotten you're acting. You've become so identified with the role that you believe it's who you really are. The costume feels like your skin. The character's limitations feel like your limitations. The character's story feels like your story. But what would happen if you suddenly remembered you were acting? In that moment of recognition, everything would shift. You would realize that you're not trapped by the character's limitations because they were never real limitations. You would see that you could step out of the role at any time or play it completely differently. This is exactly what happens in genuine transformation. You recognize that the you you've been so desperately trying to change is actually just a role you've been playing unconsciously. The limitations you've been struggling against are not real obstacles. They're simply part of a character you created and can uncreate at any moment. The person you think you need to become through months of hard work already exists. It's who you are when you're not actively being the limited version of yourself. It's your natural state before you learn to contract into patterns of fear, inadequacy, and false identity. When this recognition happens, reinvention becomes effortless because you're not trying to become someone new, you're simply stopping the exhausting process of being someone you're not. The instant recognition. Here's what transforms everything about personal change. The only thing standing between you and complete reinvention right now is your belief that you are your current patterns, stories, and limitations. The moment you recognize that these are simply habits you've been practicing rather than truths about who you are, everything becomes possible. Let me tell you about David, a successful businessman who felt trapped in a life that looked perfect from the outside but felt empty within. He had spent years trying to find fulfillment through achievements, relationships, and experiences, but nothing seemed to fill the sense of disconnection he felt. During a conversation about the nature of identity, David suddenly realized that he had been living according to an image of success that wasn't even his own. He saw that the driven, competitive person he thought he was had been constructed to meet expectations that were never aligned with his authentic nature. In that moment of recognition, the entire foundation of his identity shifted. He didn't need to figure out who he should become or create a plan for transformation. He simply began expressing himself authentically instead of maintaining the false persona he had built. Within hours, he was making different choices, having different conversations, and feeling more alive than he had in years. The changes that followed weren't efforts to become someone new. They were natural expressions of who he had always been underneath the constructed identity. This reveals something profound. Your authentic self doesn't need to be developed or created. It needs to be uncovered and allowed to emerge. While most people try to reinvent themselves by adding new qualities, skills, or characteristics, true transformation happens through subtraction. It's about removing what isn't authentically you so that what is authentically you can shine through naturally. Think of it like cleaning a dirty window. You don't make the glass transparent by adding transparency to it. You simply remove what's obscuring its natural clarity. Your authentic self is like that clear glass. It's already there, waiting to be revealed. The patterns you want to change, the limitations you want to overcome, the aspects of yourself you want to improve are not actually parts of who you are. They're habits of thought and behavior that you've practiced so consistently that they feel permanent. But habits, no matter how ingrained, are simply repeated choices, and choices can be changed in an instant. Right now, as you're reading this, you have the capacity to simply stop practicing the habits that create your unwanted experience and start expressing yourself from your authentic nature instead. This isn't about willpower or discipline, it's about recognition and choice. The 4 instant shifts. The process of instant reinvention works through 4 natural shifts that can happen immediately when you understand their true nature. These aren't steps to practice over time, they're recognitions that transform your experience the moment they occur. Recognition. The first shift is recognizing that who you think you are is not who you actually are. Your authentic self exists prior to and independent of your thoughts, emotions, patterns, and stories. It's the aware presence that observes all these changing experiences without being defined by them. Right now, notice that there's something in you that's aware of your thoughts without being your thoughts. There's something that experiences your emotions without being your emotions. There's something that observes your patterns without being trapped by them. This aware presence is your true nature, and it's completely free from all the limitations you've been struggling with. When you recognize yourself as this aware presence rather than the collection of experiences it observes, you immediately step outside the prison of limited identity. You realize that you are the space in which all experiences arise and dissolve, not the experiences themselves. The second shift happens naturally when you recognize your true nature. The stories, patterns, and limitations that seemed so solid begin to dissolve because you see they were never actually part of who you are. They were simply clouds passing through the sky of your awareness. You don't need to struggle to release these patterns. You don't need to work through them or heal them or transform them. You simply need to stop feeding them with your attention and identification. When you withdraw your investment in limiting stories about yourself, they lose their power to define your experience. This isn't about denial or suppression. It's about seeing clearly what's actually happening versus what you've been believing is happening. When you see that your limitations are not facts about you, but simply habits of perception, they naturally begin to fade. Realignment. The third shift involves realigning with your authentic values, desires, and natural way of being. This doesn't require analysis or decision-making. It happens spontaneously when you're no longer maintaining false identity. Your authentic self knows exactly how it wants to express itself. It knows what brings joy, what feels aligned, what creates energy rather than drains it. When you stop overriding this natural intelligence with conditioned patterns, your choices naturally begin to reflect your authentic nature. You'll find yourself drawn to different activities, conversations, and experiences. You'll naturally say no to things that feel misaligned and yes to things that resonate with your truth. This isn't about following rules or strategies, it's about trusting your innate wisdom. Expression. The fourth shift is allowing your authentic nature to express itself naturally in your daily life. This happens effortlessly when you're no longer spending energy maintaining false identity. The energy that was tied up in being someone you're not becomes available for authentic self-expression. Your relationships become more genuine because you're showing up as yourself rather than who you think you should be. Your work becomes more aligned because you're following your natural gifts and interests rather than forcing yourself into molds that don't fit. Your daily choices reflect your values because you're no longer conflicted about what matters to you. This expression feels natural and sustainable because it's not something you're trying to do, it's something you are allowing to happen. The natural flow. When transformation happens through recognition rather than effort, it follows a completely different pattern than the struggle-based approaches most people use. Instead of fighting against your current experience, you simply see through the illusions that create suffering and limitation. This is like the difference between trying to escape from a dream versus waking up from the dream. In the dream, you might run and struggle and try various strategies to change your circumstances. But when you wake up, you realize that none of the problems in the dream were actually real. The solution wasn't to solve the dream problems, but to wake up from the dream itself. Most approaches to personal change operate within the dream of limited identity. They try to improve the character, fix the problems, and optimize the circumstances. But transformation through recognition wakes you up from the entire dream of limitation. When this happens, changes in your external experience follow naturally. Not because you're working to create them, but because your outer life naturally reorganizes to reflect your inner clarity. Relationships that are based on false identity either transform to accommodate your authenticity or naturally fade away. Work situations that don't align with your nature either shift to allow more authentic expression, or you find yourself drawn to new opportunities. The beauty of this approach is that you don't have to figure out what changes to make. The intelligence that knows how to grow a tree from a seed also knows how to express your authentic nature in the world. When you stop interfering with this natural intelligence through limiting beliefs and false identity, it creates changes in your life that are perfectly aligned with who you really are. Breaking time barriers. The reason most people can't imagine reinventing themselves in an hour is that they've been conditioned to believe that the mind needs time to change. But your true nature exists outside of time. It's not something that develops or evolves, it's something that is, right now, complete and whole. When you recognize your essential nature, you step outside the story of gradual improvement into the reality of immediate wholeness. You realize that you don't need to become worthy, confident, loving, or free. You already are these things. You've simply been practicing being something else. Think about learning to ride a bicycle. There's often a moment when everything suddenly clicks. One moment you're wobbling and falling, and the next moment you're riding. The shift doesn't happen gradually, it happens instantly when your body learns to trust its natural sense of balance. Personal transformation works the same way. There's often a moment when everything clicks into place. One moment you're struggling with limitation, and the next moment you're expressing your authentic nature freely. The capacity was always there, you simply learn to trust it. This doesn't mean that external changes happen instantly. Your circumstances might take time to reflect your inner transformation. But the fundamental shift in how you experience yourself and relate to life can happen immediately. Living recognition. The shift from effortful change to effortless being isn't a one-time event. It's an ongoing recognition that you can return to in any moment. Whenever you notice yourself getting caught in patterns of limitation or struggle, you can simply remember your true nature and step back into authentic expression. This is like learning to recognize when you're dreaming. Once you know the signs, you can become lucid in the dream and consciously choose your experience. Similarly, once you recognize the signs of false identity, you can consciously return to authentic being. The signs are always the same: effort, struggle, comparison, judgment, seeking, and the feeling that something is wrong or missing. These experiences are simply feedback that you've temporarily forgotten your true nature and gotten caught in the illusion of limitation. When you notice these signs, you don't need to fight them or fix them. You simply need to remember what you really are and return to authentic expression. This isn't a practice that takes years to master, it's a recognition that's available right now. Integration process. Living from this recognition doesn't require you to make dramatic external changes immediately. In fact, forcing sudden changes often creates resistance and instability. Instead, allow your authentic nature to express itself naturally in your current circumstances while remaining open to organic evolution. You might find that you relate to your work differently even if you don't change jobs immediately. You might communicate more authentically in your relationships even if the relationships themselves don't change right away. You might make different daily choices even if your lifestyle appears similar from the outside. The key is to trust the natural intelligence of transformation rather than trying to control or direct it. Your authentic self knows exactly how to navigate your specific circumstances. When you stop overriding this intelligence with fear-based planning and controlling, it creates changes that are sustainable and aligned. Sometimes the changes that emerge surprise you. Things you thought you wanted no longer feel important. Things you thought were impossible suddenly feel natural. People and opportunities that align with your authentic nature begin appearing in your life without effort on your part. This isn't magic, it's the natural result of aligning with your true nature instead of fighting against it. When you stop broadcasting the frequency of limitation and start expressing your authentic self, you naturally attract experiences that match that frequency. Beyond personal change. When you understand how instant transformation actually works, you realize that the same principle applies to every area of life. Relationships can shift in a moment of genuine understanding. Work can become fulfilling when you start expressing your authentic gifts. Health can improve when you stop fighting your body and start supporting its natural intelligence. This isn't about positive thinking or wishful believing, it's about recognizing what's actually true versus what you've been believing is true. When your perception aligns with reality instead of illusion, your experience naturally transforms to reflect that clarity. The changes that emerge from this understanding feel different than changes created through effort and struggle. They feel natural, sustainable, and in harmony with who you are. There's no sense of forcing or maintaining, just the natural expression of your authentic nature. Most importantly, this transformation is available right now, not after you do more work on yourself, not after you figure everything out, not after you become someone different. Right now, as you read these words, you have the capacity to recognize your true nature and step into authentic expression. The recognition now. As we reach the end of our hour together, the question isn't whether you can reinvent yourself instantly, it's whether you will choose to recognize who you really are beneath all the stories, patterns, and limitations you've been believing are you. Right now, notice that there's something in you that has remained constant throughout all the changes in your life. Something that was there when you were a child and is still there now. Something that observes all your experiences but is never diminished by them. Something that is naturally free, aware, and whole. This isn't something you need to develop or achieve. It's something you are, right now, in this moment. It's your true nature, and it's been waiting patiently for you to remember it beneath all the layers of conditioned identity. The reinvention you've been seeking isn't about becoming someone new, it's about stopping the exhausting process of being someone you're not. It's about allowing your authentic nature to express itself naturally instead of forcing yourself into patterns that don't fit. This recognition is available in every moment. Whenever you feel stuck, limited, or disconnected from yourself, you can simply remember what you really are and return to authentic expression. This is the ultimate freedom, not the freedom to become someone different, but the freedom to be who you really are. Your hour of transformation isn't ending, it's beginning. Every moment from now on is an opportunity to live from this recognition, to express your authentic nature, and to experience the natural joy and fulfillment that comes from being yourself. The person you've been trying to become through years of effort and struggle is who you are right now when you're not trying to be anyone else. Welcome home to yourself. Living the recognition. Now that you've glimpsed your true nature, the invitation is to live from this recognition moment by moment. This doesn't require perfect consistency or constant awareness. It simply requires a willingness to return to authenticity whenever you notice you've drifted into patterns of limitation. Start where you are, with what's immediately in front of you. Notice how it feels to respond to your current circumstances from authentic presence rather than habitual reaction. Notice how it feels to speak from truth rather than from what you think others want to hear. Notice how it feels to make choices based on what genuinely aligns with you rather than what you think you should do. These small moments of authentic expression create ripples that transform your entire experience over time. But the transformation begins right now, in this moment, with the simple recognition of who you really are. The hour has passed, but the recognition is timeless. Your authentic self isn't bound by time, efforts, or circumstances. It's always available, always whole, always free to express itself naturally in whatever situation you find yourself in. This is your reinvention, not becoming someone new, but discovering who you've always been beneath everything that isn't you. Welcome to your authentic life.